Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for another matchup video. A couple months ago I made a video on whether or not Ezio could assassinate certain Templars. Today we'll be doing something similar but with Connor Kenway, and instead of Templars it's assassins, for the most part. We'll go over a bunch of different characters and decide whether or not they defeat Connor. We'll assume both sides are in their prime, not holding back, and are facing off in a completely random encounter, so no prep time for both sides. They'll also be facing each other with their normal gear. Before we start, let's first go over the tiers and explain how I'll be ranking the characters. The first tier is Minor Obstacle. The characters in this tier will likely be pretty easy for Connor to defeat. They may have a trick or two up their sleeve, but Connor should be able to get the job done relatively quickly. Following that, we have Worthy Opponent. These characters will be able to challenge Connor, but they shouldn't be too much for him. Challenging is, well, what it sounds like. Connor will struggle in this fight, but he will ultimately come out on top. He'll likely be very injured by the end of it. 50-50 is either Connor or his opponent can win. It would be extremely difficult for either of them, and deciding the winner really depends on the scenario. And they defeat Connor is for the characters that would likely beat Connor. Since we'll be going over more than a dozen characters in this video, I won't spend too much time on each one, since we'd be here forever if we broke down and examined all their feats. If you want more in-depth breakdowns, I have Google Docs that are way too long detailing feats for a lot of the characters in this video available for channel members. With that being said, let's get right into it. The first assassin we have is Edward Kenway. He has a remake coming right around the corner, so this might change in a couple of months depending on what we see in that. But for this video, we're going to only take into consideration what we saw from the game and the books. This is a good matchup, but I would say that Connor has way more advantages than Edward in a random encounter. I think the majority of fans agree that Connor is physically more capable. I'm not saying that Edward is weak by any means, but Connor is just stronger, faster, more agile, etc, etc. I also believe Connor has a weapon advantage. Yes, Edward does carry 4 pistols, but Connor's dual pistols actually fire twice before needing to reload, so they actually have the same amount of firepower. Not to mention Connor carries way more gadgets, more ammo, and stuff that may catch Edward off guard. Edward is definitely a deadly opponent. He fights dirty, he's a great brawler, he's a natural fighter, and can hold his own in challenging situations. But in my opinion, he doesn't have the skill level that is necessary to overcome Connor's physicality. Edward's best combat feat is defeating Duncan Walpole, but let's keep in mind Duncan was very injured during their fight. Also, Edward couldn't take down El Tiburon at the end of the game and had to resort to ranged weapons. Connor, on the other hand, consistently faced Colonial and British Templars, and the British Templars are very skilled according to lore, so I'm going to put Edward in challenging. Next, we have Arno Dorian, the simp himself. Since this is going to be a random encounter, I think we all know how this will turn out. Arno's strength is his stealth skill, and unfortunately for him, that's not going to be an option. He also doesn't have the physicality to match Connor. Not to mention, he never really fought anyone even close to Connor's opponents. Arno's toughest opponent was Bayek, and Arno was struggling during that fight. Many people also believe Bayek was holding back since Arno was his apprentice and Bayek was trying to turn Arno to his side. I believe Arno can hold Connor off for some time in a duel, specifically in a sword fight, but even then I think Connor would inevitably win. Connor consistently fights numerous guards that Arno could only dream of facing. Arno goes in Worthy Opponent. I think this is a good tier for him. Altaïr. This is going to be a challenging fight for both Connor and Altaïr. Altaïr is one of, if not the most skilled protagonist in the entire series. He's physically capable, intelligent, and very experienced. He's very similar to Connor with the fact that he works alone. Almost every other assassin has notable allies that help them, but these two basically do everything by themselves, which is pretty impressive. Altaïr, in my opinion, is likely a better fighter just based on some of the situations he goes through. Like, he fought through an entire army at the end of the game, something Connor never actually did since the trailer isn't canon. He also fought a Piece of Eden user, and in Assassin's Creed Bloodlines he beat a very strong brute that likely exceeds Connor's own physical strength. Connor of course has some advantages. He has better weapons, can take more hits than Altaïr, and is physically more capable. Altaïr is probably faster and more agile, but Connor is stronger. If this was a brawl without weapons, I think Connor's got it, but if Altaïr and Connor were to fight with their melee weapons, I think Altaïr would win, but not without a high level of difficulty. He defeats Connor in my opinion. Next up we have Darius from Assassin's Creed Odyssey's DLC. Darius is a pretty old man by the time we see him, but he is definitely capable of giving Connor a decent fight. Hell, he was holding his own against Cassandra for a little while. And he had been fighting against the Order of the Ancients for decades, which is no easy feat. But despite that, I don't think Darius can match Connor, at least in a drawn-out fight. He's very old, and we saw him go down from a couple of Order members, whereas Connor consistently fought against many Templar guards. Maybe if Darius was in his prime, he'd have a better chance, but unfortunately we likely will never know. I'm going to put him in worthy opponent. He's going to be below Arno since we've seen more of Arno's capabilities. Alright, now we have one of the most loved side characters in the franchise being Yusuf from Assassin's Creed Revelations. Yusuf is a very experienced and skilled assassin. He was basically leading the Ottoman assassins before Ezio came along. And under Yusuf's leadership, the Templars were basically in hiding, or at least not as prevalent as other Templar orders. From the Master Assassin missions in Revelations, we see that the Ottoman assassins can handle themselves pretty well, whether it be in stealth or combat. And I think we'd all agree that Yusuf is more dangerous than the assassin recruits that demonstrate these skills. But we just really haven't seen too much from him. He can fight off guards and is skilled in stealth, which honestly really doesn't make him stand out too much since all assassins should be somewhat competent in those categories. Yusuf's death, while honorable, was kind of underwhelming. I don't think Connor would have fallen if he was in Yusuf's place, so I'm going to put Yusuf in, oh gosh, I guess he's going in minor obstacle. We just really haven't seen enough of him. Maybe if we got to play as him, we'd have a better idea on what he's capable of, but I just can't justify putting him in any other tier. Let's talk about Bayek of Siwa. Now, I'm going to admit that I may have downplayed Connor versus Bayek years ago. I used to think that Connor takes this mid to high difficulty, and while I still ultimately think Connor wins, I think it's going to be a very challenging fight. In a pure melee fight, I think Bayek's got Connor, though I think it could go either way depending on the exact situation. And the reason I lean more towards Bayek is because of the sheer number of warriors Bayek defeats. He defeated war elephants, falakis, and Piece of Eden wielders. But with their base arsenal, I think Connor takes it. He obviously has a weapon and gadget advantage, and we have seen Bayek struggle against some of his opponent's gadgets in Origins. And in an unarmed fight, Connor likely wins too. He shows more skill when fighting, is capable of disarming opponents, something Bayek never actually demonstrated, and even won a brawling tournament despite being poisoned. Bayek is of course a great fighter and deadly opponent, but I'm going to lean more towards Connor. I'm putting Bayek in challenging. I'm going to put him under Edward since I think Edward's arsenal will be a little more of a challenge to Connor despite Bayek being a better fighter than Edward. Now we have Cesare Borgia. I know he's not an assassin, but he's here to keep the list fresh. If Connor had to assassinate Cesare, I'd say this would be pretty hard given Cesare's resources. But since we're talking about random fights, we all know Connor's got this. Cesare literally ran away from Ezio in every encounter except the one where he literally couldn't. And I do believe Connor from AC3 is around Brotherhood Ezio's skill level. Cesare, even with his endless amount of guards, couldn't beat Ezio. Cesare did sort of match Ezio for a brief time, but I don't think that's enough of an argument for him beating Connor. Connor fought against Haytham in a very injured state, and I'd say Haytham is well above Cesare, especially if you look at Assassin's Creed Forsaken. Cesare really doesn't have any advantages over Connor. He goes in minor obstacle. Next up we have Naoe, one of the two newest Assassin's Creed protagonists. Naoe is very deadly at stealth, and in the couple of combat encounters she has, she can definitely hold her own. Unfortunately for her, Shadows has most of the combat missions saved for Yasuke, so we don't have too much information about her. That being said, I haven't played all of the side missions in Shadows, so maybe she has some crazy feat that I just don't know of. But from what I've seen and played, she is well trained and very agile, so she could give Connor a decent challenge. But she just doesn't really have anything that could turn the fight in her favor. Connor has the technology advantage, the physical advantage, and has way more experience. He arguably may even be faster than Naoe. I know Naoe is faster gameplay wise, but Connor definitely has showcased his speed way more. I'm going to put her in worthy opponent, but let me know if you guys agree. I haven't 100%ed Shadow side content yet, so I may be missing something. And if I am, let me know. Now we have Ezio from Revelations, arguably the deadliest version of Ezio going up against Connor. This is always such a tough matchup for me. I personally believe Brotherhood Ezio and Connor is 50-50, maybe leaning slightly towards Ezio. But Revelations Ezio is just so experienced and frankly too tired of this shit. Revelations Ezio is a little past his prime. He's definitely slower and less agile, but in terms of his combat skill and physical strength, I think he's at his peak. He has so much knowledge at this point in time that would give Connor some trouble. Ezio will have a challenging time matching Connor's physical attributes, especially since at this time Connor would be a little faster than Ezio, whereas Ezio in both AC2 and Brotherhood would likely have had the speed advantage. However, Ezio's intelligence would play a huge part in this battle, which shouldn't be overlooked. He also has an expanded arsenal of bombs, so he can match Connor's trip mines and explosives if needed. Revelations Ezio is probably the version of Ezio that is most comfortable when it comes to fights. Like AC2 Ezio preferred stealth, Brotherhood was sort of a mixed bag, but Revelations has no problem challenging armies of Templars to fights. So I'm going to say that Revelations Ezio wins, though it will be close. Let's move on to Shay Cormac. This is a really interesting matchup because it can actually happen if Ubisoft wanted to make it happen. And if Ubisoft is listening, please do it. Shay would be a little older, but you could give him a piece of Eden that makes him younger or something. Anyways, assuming they're in their primes, Connor versus Shay is a very controversial and debatable matchup in the community. But I honestly think Connor takes this, and let me explain. Most of Shay's targets don't compare to Connor. The only one you could probably argue is Adewale, but Adewale was a senior citizen by the time of Rogue, and he didn't even have most of his arsenal. Imagine when Connor faced Haytham used his hidden blades instead of his sword. Like, we'd all notice that and call it out, but for some reason nobody really brings that up with Adewale. Connor, on the other hand, did face Haytham while severely injured, and we know that from Assassin's Creed Forsaken that Haytham wasn't holding back during the fight. And I personally think that Haytham is deadlier than Shay, and certainly deadlier than any of Shay's targets. Also, you can bring up that Connor consistently fights in way more missions than Shay. Connor's always ambushing the British soldiers or fighting Templars, whereas a lot of Shay's missions are stealth-related. And since we're mostly judging by random combat encounters, I think Shay goes in challenging, but I'll put him at the very top of this tier. Next up we have Kassandra, and we're talking about the game version of Kassandra, not the novel, since the book version of Kassandra is really nerfed, and to be honest, now that I think of it, would probably be a more fair fight, since she doesn't have abilities in the book and she's just a normal human in it. But we'll save that matchup for part 2. Anyways, Kassandra is a really strong opponent. Like, some of the enemies she defeats would seriously pose a challenge for Mr. Kenway. She also wields a piece of Eden. Granted, it's debatable whether or not her abilities are canon because there are some inconsistencies. Like, in cutscenes she'll get hurt from falls, but in gameplay she can just ignore it. Not to mention other characters in the series also have those same abilities, and they aren't an Isu hybrid, nor do they have a piece of Eden. But if the abilities are canon, they would likely overwhelm Connor. Connor, of course, has some strengths. I'd say he's likely faster than Kassandra, probably a little more durable, like he has canonically been hit with explosions and stuff unlike Kassandra. He has a lot of weapons, but she is practically a demigod, so I say she beats Connor. Next is Evie Frye from Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Evie has Connor beat with her intelligence and knowledge, but to be honest, I don't think that's close to enough. Evie and Jacob really only ever fight against gang members compared to the others in this video that take on skilled soldiers. Also, it's worth remembering that Evie couldn't beat Jack the Ripper in a head-on fight and had to resort to stealth to weaken him. And Connor would definitely rip Jack apart, let's be real. Even with Jacob's help and then with Henry's help, they barely won against Starrick, who was holding back according to the novel Assassin's Creed Underworld. So she goes in worthy opponent at the end of the list. And for the last matchup of this video, we have Basim from Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Basim in Mirage is a pretty average assassin in my opinion, but Valhalla Basim is just on another level. Spoilers for Valhalla, by the way, but Basim is a reincarnation or sage of WaKy at this point, and he is incredibly skilled. By the time of Valhalla, he has so much experience, and what really carries him is the fact that he fought on par with Eivor and had a couple of moments where he could have actually killed her. It's debatable how skilled you think Eivor herself is, but I think most people would agree that she is around Connor's level of combat skill, if not above it. Basim was able to sort of overwhelm Eivor with his agility and gadgets, and Connor would probably be more knowledgeable at fighting against those assassin strategies compared to Eivor. I think Connor has a decent chance against Valhalla Basim. Connor is no slouch and can handle himself in a fight, and if it was Mirage Basim, Connor would obviously win, but I'm going to put Valhalla Basim at 50-50. And that is everything for this video. Obviously this was my opinion and it was a more casual matchup video rather than a full in-depth analysis for all of these characters. But let me know if you liked it. If you disagree or want to add to any of the outcomes, let me know why you think so in the comments. I enjoyed making this video and I think I'll be making a part 2 in the next week or so. So if you have any characters you want to see Connor or any other assassin take on, leave them in the comments. With that being said, thanks for watching and as usual, have a great rest of your day.